Hey there, this is Natalie, and Tappei Nagatsuki is still on fire, bringing us the bounty that is another new chapter of the ReZero web novel, Arc 7, Chapter 6, entitled, at least according to my machine translation, Far South. By the way, it seems that Google's awesome translation of Chapter 6's title to A Man is Hard wasn't entirely in line with Tappei's intentions, and the idea was more along the lines of, it's hard to be a man. But this is why I keep on using Google Translate, even though better machine translations exist for fiction. I just like how unintentionally funny it is sometimes. As always, please consider helping me out by hitting the subscribe button and liking this video if you're enjoying these summaries of the new web novel chapters. And also look out for my other ReZero videos, including theories, analysis, and coverage of the anime. It's hard work keeping up with it all at the moment, so I really value the encouragement from you guys subscribing and talking to me about these intriguing new chapters in the comments. And with the shameless self-promotion out of the way, let's break down what happens in ReZero Arc 7, Chapter 6. As has become the tradition with these new Arc 7 chapters, Chapter 6 begins with a memory of Subaru's from a time when he was together with his friends, and this time it's of a conversation with Garfield and Otto while they're playing a board game. Like the other slice of life type scenes, other than the Rem one, this seems to take place sometime during the time skip between Arcs 4 and 5, as Subaru mentions that he's making good progress with his training. Subaru asks Otto what the most dangerous experience he had as a travelling merchant was, and after being pushed to tell the story, Otto talks about the time he was attacked and left in a cave to die, until some passers-by saved him. He's talking about the event in Arc 3 that led to him meeting Subaru, where Ricardo rescued him after the witch cult took him captive, but he leaves out enough details that Subaru doesn't realise. Subaru says he'd like to thank the people who saved Otto's life, and Otto responds quite emotionally, without Subaru really understanding why. Garfield says that Otto won't have to worry about stuff like that anymore because he'll protect him, and Otto says that Garfield is indeed strong, but Natsuki-san not so much, and Subaru gets annoyed at being compared to Garfield when it comes to strength. Then there's some more of what's probably the usual great banter between the three, and Subaru gets badly beaten in their game. But then, of course, we return to the far less pleasant time Subaru's having now. It becomes immediately clear what the relevance of the conversation with Otto is to Subaru's current situation, as Subaru, tied up and taken prisoner, just as Otto was in his story, thinks it's natural under these circumstances to do what Otto did, and prepare for death. Subaru asks the two men in front of him, the one who kicked him and the one who took off his blindfold, what happened to Rem. The more hostile man responds by mocking him for being worried about that when he's just been told he's a prisoner of war. Subaru notices that the men are what he would classify as warriors rather than knights. He thinks a warrior only needs to fight, whereas knights have the responsibility of being trusted by the people too, and these men lack that clean and noble appearance that people like Reinhard and Julius have. The more violent of the two men is described as being a little older than Subaru, with bright orange hair, and he's smiling, though it does nothing to make Subaru feel at ease. But after some pushing, they tell him that Rem and Louis, who Subaru didn't actually ask about, are fine, but they're being held as prisoners too. As Subaru tries to hear more about the situation though, a man with an eye patch appears and begins kicking the broken fingers on Subaru's hand, causing him a lot of pain. The other men call this man Jamal and tell him to stop because otherwise Subaru will pass out again. Jamal backs off after some persuasion from the other man and leaves, telling Subaru to thank Todd. The younger man, Todd, then explains to Subaru that it had been Jamal's troops who'd found them, but that Rem had put up a fight and beaten half of them, as well as crushing the captain's face. Now Todd wants to try to press Subaru for some information and asks him about a group of people that Google Translate calls the people of Sudrac. But whether that's anything like what they're actually called, we'll find out eventually. Subaru's never heard of the people of Sudrac, and from the way he repeats the word, like Sudraku, when asked about them, Todd realises that he doesn't know anything, so at least Subaru doesn't need to convince him of that. Todd tells them that they're who the army at the camp Subaru's been taken to are looking for, and they're based in the forest. The forest is called the Bedheim Jungle, it turns out, and it's huge, possibly on a scale similar to the Amazon. Todd, it seems, has been sent here away from his fiancée, and is worried that she won't wait for him if he's gone for years searching it. Realising that Subaru's been honest with him and doesn't know anything useful, Todd agrees to untie his legs and take him to the prison where Rem and Louis are being held. As they walk, Subaru estimates that there are about 100 warriors in the camp, and feels bad for Todd and his fiancée, because 100 men could never search the jungle. Now Todd asks him where he got the knife he had with him when he was captured, and Subaru wonders what to say. If the masked man who gave it to him was one of the people of Sudrac, he doesn't want to betray him after he was so generous to him. He lies and says the knife is his own and a family heirloom, but this makes Todd ask him if he's also from a noble family. The knife has on it the crest of the Emperor, a wolf pierced through by a sword, and for something bearing the crest to be a family heirloom would mean the family was Vollachian nobility. It's only now that Subaru looks around and sees the same crest on the flags above the tents. He puts aside wondering what this means about the masked man, because he has a much more worrying realisation to deal with. He's just learned he's been transported to another country. Now Subaru thinks about what he knows about Vollachia, and the impression that he has of it is that it's a den of evil. He knows that it's a nation where all different races mix together, but that this is not because it's more egalitarian than Lugunica, but because what's valued here is strength rather than bloodline or social class. He hears a man say "Viva Vollachia," and Todd responds with the same, confirming it. Now Subaru knows his original idea that he could state who he was as Emilia's knight once he'd confirmed Rem was safe is out of the question. He's read history books and knows that while hostilities between Lugunica and Vollachia have not been open since Lugunica came under the protection of the dragon 400 years ago, the two nations are in a state of Cold War, and that where this is the edge of a battlefield, he can't be expected to be treated as a state guest by people like Jamal if he announces himself as a Lugunican knight. Subaru realises he's going to have to BS it, and when Todd notices him lagging behind in his thought, he lays it on thick, saying that he was just moved by hearing them saying "Viva Vollachia," which Todd totally buys, saying that that's understandable if he's from a noble house. But Todd says it's something he personally doesn't really care about. Subaru is taken to a cage where Rem is being kept, and confirms that she's okay. She's still very cold towards him, but she's unharmed. Obviously, Jamal's men came off a lot worse than she did. Subaru asks Todd if they can be released now that they know they're nothing to do with the people of Sudrac, and Todd says that it wouldn't be safe, as there are bases like this all over the forest, and they'd be liable to just be captured and interrogated again, and that most soldiers aren't like him. He says that they can go with a team doing a supply run to a town in a few days and leave there. But now Subaru asks about Louis, noticing she isn't in the cage with Rem, even though it had already been said that both were prisoners. Todd said she'd had a wound on her head and had been taken for healing, and Subaru is instantly terrified. He's worried that if any magical healing is carried out on Louis, she might revert from this strange, abnormal state she's been in to her full power as an Archbishop of Gluttony, and then nobody at the camp will stand a chance. He finds out which tent she's being treated in from Todd and rushes there in a panic, but when he gets there, Louis glomps onto him, hurting his broken fingers. Todd arrives and it turns out that Louis has had her wounds cleaned and bandaged. She's been receiving medical healing rather than anything magical, and so what Subaru was afraid of is not the case. In relief, he talks to Todd some more and agrees that they're okay to stay there for a few days, then leave with the supply team, and Todd says that they can be put to work, where they're short-handed around the base, and only people who work get to eat. And that's the end of the chapter. So now Subaru seems to be in about the best situation he's been in so far this arc, which isn't saying much, given nobody's trying to immediately kill him, and the worst thing that happened to him was a little bit of torture in the form of having some broken fingers kicked, which is practically a vacation by this arc's standards. Still, now he's realised that they've travelled much further than he thought, and that now he can consider the whole country he's in as dangerous, rather than just the forest or the army camp. It also seems like the masked man, unless he stole the knife, is Vollachian nobility, though that was pretty much expected to us, given that unlike Subaru, we already knew he was in Vollachia, and the man did look like a noble of some kind in his dress. We also now know that there's a faction called the People of Sudrac, or something along those lines, which the Vollachian soldiers are very keen to find. Maybe the hunter is something to do with them. We'll have to wait and see. But that's all for this video. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell if you want to be notified when my next chapter summary is uploaded, given Tappei isn't releasing these to a schedule, so I can't tell you when the next one of these videos will be. But at the rate he's putting Arc 7 out so far, I don't expect there will be long to wait. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon.